Hi everybody, Dhaman Mehta here, and thank you for once again joining me on my journey as I go through my favorites list on fanfiction.net. There's actually two kind of milestones here. One is not, it's not, it's, okay, so for those of you that don't know, I have made, this will be the 130th video that I'll be making for this series. So that's a milestone. But yeah, I've been reading fan fiction a lot, so long time. And my favorites list, I on a different thread that I saw another guy going through his favorites list, and I thought, you know what, let me curate mine. Why don't I? So I've decided to go through. Um, the list started with like 1,260 stories. I don't. There aren't that many anymore. Some of them have been taken down by the authors from the list. I did occasionally add more, but I think right now my list is sitting at 1,250 stories total. Something like that. But yeah, I am. So now I've been reading them from when they were published and reading their latest incarnations whenever I get to them and seeing if they still deserve to stay on my list or not. So let's dive into this set of stories. And as always, I will link these stories in the description. So if you want to read them for yourselves after my remarks, feel free, give them a look. And as well as links to like my fanfiction.net profile, the thread on the Sufficient Velocity forums where I also post this stuff, and a link to the playlist. So if you want to see these from the beginning or you want to jump to places, all those things are going to be there. So let's dive into the stories. So first story we have is Suna no Hoshi by Felicity Dream. This is a Naruto story where at the beginning Kushina, Naruto's mom, lives a little bit longer and takes Naruto and flees to Suna, the desert, and has Naruto raised in Suna. So the main thing that's weird here is, so Naruto still grows up as an orphan. She's also a girl. That's a difference. But also the thing is, the reason Kushina went to the land of the sands is because she knew the Kazekage, so she tells the Kazekage to look out for Naruto. And Naruto, she doesn't find him. But then when they finally meet, when Naruto becomes a Genin, this is where it's kind of weird because the main relationship of this story is Naruto with the Kazekage, and that is definitely that's definitely a point that I can see a lot of people being like iffy on, because obviously the Kazekage is old enough to have been friends with Naruto's mom, which means he's old enough to be Naruto's dad. That's like plain there. They try to make it a little bump. They bump up Naruto's age in this so that canon, which is when they meet and stuff, is like she's 16. It's not explicitly told, especially not at the beginning. I think it gets mentioned sometime in like so this is 19 chapters, not complete. This I think I only realized she was 16 and not 13 was like in like chapter 12 or something. It's like one sentence mentioned that she's 16. So yeah, I get the point that this relationship, especially being the main relationship, can be a bit iffy, and like you don't want to. I'm a little squicky on that too. But what actually happens in the relationship, and as far as the story goes, the furthest they get when this goes on is kissing. Like they kissed a little, and not even like deeping, and just like it's like literally the end of this story before when the author gives up. They were still just really starting the romance portion. The majority of this story is basically romantic comedy hijinks with everybody, like with the Kazekage acting like a complete idiot and stuff around Naruto, and Naruto being like willfully ignorant or blissfully ignorant, but also still crushing on him as well. So like that's the stuff that I actually did enjoy that. I did smile and chuckle a lot as this was going on. But I will fully admit that like the skeeviness of this whole thing of like teenager getting crushed on by literally parents' friend who was told to look out for her in the sense and like in the sense of raise her, but because he lost her for years and only found her again as a teenager, now wants to relationship her. Yeah, it's skeeviness. It's skeevy as hell. But like I said, if so, that is why I'm not gonna keep this off the list, because mainly that one point really still was always in my head as I was reading this. But if you can look past that, or like you don't find it interesting, I actually did like the story pretty well, and the comedy hijink stuff and stuff was entertaining. So I think if you if you can step past the hurdle of the age gap, and you want like a romantic comedy, granted it's not complete, but like basically if you want some romantic comedy, this is a pretty good story, but it's not going to stay on my list. Number 2 is Dodgers, Dresses, Teddy Bears, and Spot by Clell65619. And this is a Harry Potter crossover with the Munsters, where Harry basically gets adopted by the Munsters. Like when one of the Munsters find Harry on the sidewalk. Well, not the Munster. So I don't know the Munsters show. I haven't seen it ever or anything. What happens is apparently like the grandfather or great grandfather patriarch of the Munster family is a super vampire, comes across Harry after he's been dumped on the doorstep, picks him up, and has the Munster family raise him as their kid. And that leads to Harry growing up as a Munster. And then when the Hogwarts letter comes, he's like, nah, I don't want to leave. I want to stay with my family. And then a whole bunch of people come to try and convince him otherwise, which doesn't work out. And a lot of Munster family shenanigans happens, I guess. As I said, I don't know the Munsters at all. What I do know, and what I can tell from reading the story is, functionally, this is a Harry Potter gets raised by a different family story, and I found it to be highly enjoyable. The characters were all the Munsters, and the way they're written and explained, I didn't know anything about them, but I found them all to be really entertaining and enjoyable. Harry's really fun. His relationships become interesting. The fact that like the grandfather's like super overpowered, so like he screws with Voldemort and like basically makes him into the family pet is like interesting as well. Like I found this to be really funny, and I think anybody else who wants a decent, like not a long-ish one-shot humor fic will be very satisfied here, and it's going to stay on my list. Next is Zero Art Online by Rack. And Rack is another author who I have a shit ton of his stories on my favorites list. I like this author a lot. This story, normally his stories have been more in the Haruhi Suzumiya universe. This one, however, is a Familiar of Zero crossover with Sword Art Online, where when Louise goes to summon her familiar, instead she gets sucked into Sword Art Online, the first game. And it goes through the whole game. The story, this is a 3-shot that's complete, and it's really, really interesting. Like the first 2 chapters are basically the Sword Art Online story, and then afterwards it's the 3rd chapter is basically Louise getting sent back to her world and then dealing with the aftermath of living in Sword Art Online and stuff. And I really enjoyed this a lot. It's a tight story that still, even though it goes through all of that plot, still has enough time to put in scenes that inject both humor and give the characters personality, as well as giving a clear insight in how Louise's presence actually changes the Sword Art Online canon storyline, and doesn't just leave her as just this is, instead of 10,000 people, there were 10,001, but everything else was exactly the same. Like, no, this actually does a lot to give it a purpose for her to be there, canon-wise. And also, like, the final chapter, not only the stuff where she's back in her world, but the actual mini, like, little ending epilogue that's there, wraps up the story very, very nicely and cleanly, and leaves you with a sweet, melancholic feeling as an ending that will really keep this story with you in your head for a while. And I really, really like this story. It's going to stay on my list. Number 4 is Reset by Knife Hand. And this is another Harry Potter video game fic. there's actually been I think there was a bunch of them in the last couple videos. But like this one gets to the troll incident of the first year, so it does get farther than most of the ones that I've previously talked about, and way shorter as well. This is only 11K words that the author got out, but again, this isn't complete. But the thing is also the shortness in length also leads to the fact that it's not. I guess it's just not as interesting as the others. Not just because it doesn't go deep dive into the stuff, though that's part of it, but like the video game gimmick doesn't really get used for anything. Like it honestly might as well have just been a time travel fic for all that happens. Like yes, I won't say that it's like completely absent. There is the mentions of level ups and things like that. But honestly, like all the other fics used the video game like idea or the thing video game aspect in a much more concrete sense, where like yes, it's a video game, so Harry's gonna actively do stuff with the video game, whereas here it's just incidental that like yeah, he's smart, he knows some stuff, and then as he's doing stuff because of things he knows, I'll get an extra +2, like I'll occasionally level up, I'll get some +2 magic or whatever. Like it's kind of pointless, and there's no, obviously it's incomplete and there's no narrative conclusions or anything. I think you can easily skip this, and like it's not even worth looking at as like a Harry Potter video game fic because of curiosity. There's much better ones. There's much better ones that are both longer, and even the shorter ones that I took off my list that I previously talked about. I think those are better as well than this, even if they didn't stay on my list. And this one's definitely not staying on my list. Following with that, we have Doorbell by Sapphire Swimming. And this is a short scene that takes place. It's a Danny Phantom one shot that is one scene that takes place after Danny dies in some unspecified way. And it's Maddie and Jazz like just coping, and then hearing a doorbell and opening it to discover Danielle. So I've said before in the other two, because like when I read this, I still remember the first time I read this, because I had found the author, looked at their author's page, and just started scrolling through their one shots, and just by happenstance happened to read her stories after, before, and then this one, Doorbell, right after one another, and after and before I think were meant to connect, but this one was not, and they just turned into a weird trilogy that is super compelling, and I feel like really it ends up creating a lot of dramatic weight, and gives a lot of like emotional satisfaction to the reader, and it's like very not satisfaction in the good sense, but like it becomes a very good story. Without the context of reading it as a trilogy, like this scene by itself works as a brief like insight into grief, but like I will admit that like my ruling on this one is very much colored by the fact that I read these as a trilogy, and so I'm taking them as a whole and reading and keeping this on my list because of all three. I feel like like I said, like it is a little bit of a good scene by itself, but when you add it definitely would have benefited by it. Like if it had been part of a larger story, this would have been like a great scene for it. And also, like I said, with those two other one shots, if you read them all together, I feel like it's super super great. As it stands by itself, you might get something out of it, but definitely check out her other the after and before, and read these together. But it's going to stay on my list because, like I said, that trilogy is super compelling for me, and I'm keeping it on my list. So I think next is 6. Yeah, so 6th story is Deathly Hallowed by Shujin 1. And this is another Harry Potter story where Harry's mom Lily basically makes a deal with Death and like for the cloak, and asks Death to be Harry's best friend, and so Harry's connected to an eldritch horror, and Lily survives that night and ends up like kind of getting mentally screwed up because she's also seeing things not meant to be seen and dealing with other stuff like that. So Lily being alive in this story changes quite a bit of the political landscape of Harry when he gets to be 11 years old. In very different ways that make it very different from canon, because not only is she alive, but because of the things she's seen, her mentality and behavior is very different from just being, oh, I'm just super like Molly Weasley 2.0 or something, where it's like, oh, I only like good people, the good light side and Dumbledore's team or whatever. And like she's friends with like lots of people. She bailed out like the Lucius Malfoy, stuff like that, for reasons, and it's like it changes a lot of stuff. And by the time Hogwarts rolls around and Harry's best friend shows up, like there's like, you know, Harry's best friend Death. It's a lot of intriguing interactions, but at the same time as all of that, I personally just could not get invested in this story. Like I said, it certainly has some interesting elements, both in like the different dynamic and like the horror elements that are there, and I think you should give it a look. But the lack of, it's not complete, and I personally just got bored halfway through, so I won't be revisiting this again, and it's going to fall off my list. But I do say give it a look, and maybe you'll be able to get something out of it that I didn't. And the last one for this video is A Sacrifice Worth It by E4MJ. And this is a one-shot, single scene that is an alternate way to wrap up the whole Voldemort debacle. Like, it takes place in like during Harry's 5th year, and it's a thing where like, actually no, it's summer after Departed. So okay, yeah, that's why. So because I thought, because Sirius doesn't die here, so but this takes place in the summer after Harry's 5th year, and it's a scene where Voldemort just bursts into like the number 12 Grimmauld Place, and then it's a story where Harry sacrifices a whole bunch of himself in order to see his friends live another day. Nothing explicit is there, but there are like implications made of like torture and sex and things like that. Nothing's, but the author doesn't really describe it. Just like this happened kind of off screen. And basically it all culminates in Harry being the martyr that he was made to be. It's written well enough to be engaging, but it's nothing it's not mind-blowing enough for me to want to come back to it again and again and again. Basically, if you want a story where Harry beats Voldemort by fully diving into the whole martyr mindset and going into a whole like sacrificial lamb Harry, and you want to see him sacrifice bits and pieces of not only his morals, ethics, and like actual body, but like all that stuff, give it a look and you'll probably be satisfied. Like, I think it's a perfectly okay story, like B plus ish, but it's not something I would ever I would want to look for and like revisit. Not in the sense that I think it's bad, or like in the sense of like, oh, it's so ski. It's just like it was okay. So yeah, because of that, it's not gonna stay on my list. So there we go. That's all the stories for this video. The fan fiction status time, when I talk about the other milestone, like I said, like I have now read 900 stories. 900 stories, and 422 of them have stayed on my list so far. That is a lot. Like I said at the beginning, I believe I have like 350 left, maybe a little bit more. I'm not sure the exact number, but I think it's that much. So as always, like links to all the stories in the description, like said at the top of the video. If you like this video and you want to see, you know, when the next things come, because I will fully admit I have a very I put these out when they come out, you know, like I put them out when I've read enough and then have time to film. So subscribe if you want to actually see these things. Otherwise, like, you just gotta hope that they show up. But thank you if you watched this video and got to the end. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.